Queen Camilla's summer escapes were always brushed off as harmless retreats. Every year she'd vanish quietly to the same countryside villa. No staff, no family, no trace of where she went. It seemed innocent enough, until King Charles decided to see the place for himself. What he and Prince William discovered behind those walls sent shockwaves through the palace and changed how the royals saw her forever. So, what was really happening inside that mysterious villa? And how did it almost push the monarchy to its breaking point? This is the unsettling truth behind Queen Camilla's secret holidays. Each summer, while the rest of the royal family flew off to their usual luxury vacations, Camilla slipped away to one hidden spot in the English countryside. Every detail stayed the same. Same time, same place, same silence. It became her ritual. No official mention from the palace, no photos, no press. Even the royal communications team quietly left her out of public schedules. At first, people assumed she just wanted quiet time away from duty, but as the years passed, her secrecy started raising eyebrows. Her trips became less about relaxation and more about control, a private world no one else could enter. Insiders whispered that something about those holidays didn't feel right anymore. Before we dive into the strange things that happened inside, let's talk about the villa itself. Hidden behind tall hedges and surrounded by acres of manicured gardens, the property was sealed off by an old stone wall. Locals called it the Silent House because no sound ever came from it. Not laughter, not music, not even birdsong. It was eerie, like nature itself avoided the place. Neighbours rarely saw her come or go. A line of dark vehicles would arrive one morning, vanish 2 weeks later, and that was it. During those 2 weeks, the entire villa went off the grid. No phone service, no deliveries, no visitors. Even King Charles and Prince William couldn't contact her directly. At first, everyone thought it was harmless, Camilla's version of peace and quiet. But over the years, it began to look more like a secret she guarded fiercely. Palace sources say Charles once asked to join her early in their marriage, but she refused, gently telling him she needed quiet to think. That excuse became her shield every summer after that. William never pressed her about it, though he admitted it seemed strange, isolating herself so completely while the rest of the family valued spending holidays together. Her refusal to allow anyone near her, no family, no friends, no staff, turned what could have been a simple retreat into one of the most rumoured mysteries within royal circles. The palace staff understood the rule. Her holidays were never to be questioned. The orders came directly from the private secretary's office. The butlers, drivers and housekeepers involved in the trip signed special non-disclosure agreements that prohibited them from discussing even the smallest detail. It was as though she vanished into another world, one that existed parallel to the royal family, but entirely disconnected from it. The few who worked there during her stays described an atmosphere of quiet intensity. Every task was done precisely, every surface cleaned, and every curtain fell perfectly even. There was no room for imperfection, no space for conversation beyond the necessary. Stay tuned, because here's where things start to get really strange. Outside the palace, the media grew curious each year. Newspapers, such as the Daily Mail and the Mirror, ran stories about her absences. According to the reports, the Queen's holidays were mystery getaways. Some claimed she was meeting private consultants or spiritual healers. Others suggested she was working on secret memoirs or even managing her own network of influence separate from the crown. Photographers attempted to follow her convoys, but always lost track before reaching the countryside. The few blurred photographs that surfaced showed nothing more than an estate gate and a shadow at a window. What made it worse was the total lack of leaks in a world where royal secrets often found their way into tabloids. Within hours, Camilla's private world remained impenetrable. Her villa operated on paranoia. Staff were instructed to communicate only through handwritten notes slipped under doors. Meals were prepared according to exact instructions and left outside her suite without a word. There was no access to the main building without clearance from the head of her private security. Even letters from the palace were screened and delivered through an internal courier who never saw her face. The rules were so strict that when a young gardener once tried to take a phone picture of the grounds, he was dismissed the same evening and replaced by someone brought in from outside the region. No one ever questioned why, but there's something most people don't know about this. You see, the security around the villa was unusually advanced for a private residence. According to estimates by local contractors, the system cost more than £300,000 to install, complete with motion sensors, underground trip alarms, and high-definition cameras hidden in garden lamps. Guards rotated every 6 hours, maintaining constant surveillance. Even when the property appeared empty, there were checkpoints along the private driveway, and vehicles were searched before entry, even if they carried palace-approved staff. What stunned everyone most was the level of control Camilla had over her secret hideaway. Not even senior palace officials could view the security footage without her written consent. That villa wasn't just her retreat, it was her fortress, and she protected it like one. Those who'd been inside during her private stays said the atmosphere felt too perfect, almost unnatural. Every room looked measured and symmetrical. Curtains were always drawn halfway, letting in just enough light to glow, but never enough to see the world outside. Fresh white roses were replaced every morning, filling the air with a soft mix of lavender and something strangely sterile, like the scent of a museum. The polished floors gleamed so bright they reflected the ceiling. There wasn't a single misplaced book or crooked photo frame. Everything looked frozen in time, too flawless to feel real. Camilla's routines only deepened the mystery. She spent long hours reading in the garden, yet staff swore she barely turned the pages. At dawn, she walked the grounds alone, whispering softly to herself. Other days, she stayed indoors with the curtains shut tight, the only sounds being her faint footsteps moving from one room to another. Some staff claimed to hear low murmurs behind closed doors, but nobody dared to ask. Her meals were always simple: soups, tea, nothing more, and she never requested entertainment. The villa became her own silent world, built entirely around her rules. In palace circles, the estate soon became a quiet warning. When her name came up, senior aides exchanged looks but never spoke. New staff were told bluntly, "Don't ask about the villa," yet rumours still spread, some harmless, others unsettling. People whispered that those walls had witnessed more royal secrets than any other property in Britain. Among journalists, "She's gone to the villa" became code for something deeper, not a vacation, but a full retreat into mystery. As time went on, curiosity turned into quiet concern. King Charles respected her privacy, but even he began to wonder what kept drawing her back there. William noticed something odd too. Her entire staff list changed every single year, as if she didn't want anyone serving her twice. One of her former dressers once revealed that the villa's furniture had been replaced 3 times in just 10 years. No one knew why. It was as though Camilla wanted to erase every trace of herself, to leave nothing behind. And each summer, without fail, she vanished once again into that stone-walled estate, shielded from cameras and questions, coming back 2 weeks later, looking refreshed but distant. Whatever she sought within those walls stayed there with her. Something about it no longer felt like a private retreat. It felt like a secret waiting to be uncovered, and soon that secret would force its way out during a royal property inspection that would change everything the royal family thought they knew about her. Things are about to go wild. Keep watching King Charles. Shocking discovery. When King Charles decided to carry out a quiet inspection of all royal properties, it was supposed to be nothing more than routine. He had taken a personal interest in ensuring every estate was being well maintained and secure, especially as questions had been rising in Parliament about royal spending. There were dozens of properties scattered across the country from Balmoral to Sandringham, but one in particular caught his attention: the secluded countryside villa that Camilla disappeared to every summer. It had been years since he had seen the place himself. Since she was away on her usual retreat abroad, he saw it as the perfect time to look things over. William agreed to join him, partly out of curiosity and partly because he had always found the mystery of that villa unsettling. Their journey was deliberately quiet. There were no press photographers, no staff cars following behind, and no official announcement of the visit. They travelled with only 2 trusted aides in a discreet black Range Rover, leaving Windsor early in the morning before the public noticed. The countryside roads were empty, lined with frost and mist as they neared the estate. The air grew heavier, and even William felt a strange tension building. It was meant to be just another inspection, but something about this trip didn't feel ordinary. At first, it seemed normal, until it wasn't. When they reached the gates, the guards were visibly startled. The king rarely made unannounced appearances, especially at Camilla's private residence. Still, they quickly opened the heavy iron gates and the convoy rolled into the long tree-lined driveway. The villa came into view slowly through the fog, tall still and too perfect. The gardens were flawlessly trimmed, the gravel freshly raked, and yet there was an eerie emptiness to it. The air itself felt thick, as though sound had been swallowed by the walls. Charles noticed immediately that there were no birds on the property, not even a crow or sparrow, even for winter. That was unusual, unnervingly so. The butler, who had been stationed there since the last retreat, greeted them nervously, his hands trembling as he bowed. He explained that everything had been kept exactly as Camilla left it, following her standing orders. Charles walked through the entrance hall, his shoes scratching the marble floor with a sharp echo. William stayed behind, scanning the furniture, the carefully arranged vases, the polished frames. The entire house looked as though it had been cleaned minutes ago, suspiciously perfect, frozen in time, waiting for something to break the silence. The carpets were new, the silverware shone without a single fingerprint, and the air smelled faintly of lavender and disinfectant. The windows were spotless, the drapes evenly pleated, and the fireplace looked unused. Here's where things start to get strange. Charles paused in the sitting room and noticed something odd. The grandfather clock by the wall had stopped at precisely midnight, even though its mechanism was new. The piano nearby had its cover on, yet the keys beneath had been polished recently, as if someone had touched them not long ago. In the corner stood a chair that faced the wall, slightly out of alignment with the rest of the furniture. The king felt a small chill. William, walking behind him, remarked quietly that it didn't feel like a house left empty. It felt like a place waiting for someone. As they moved deeper inside, the perfection of the villa became almost oppressive. Every object looked staged, as if part of a museum exhibit. In the dining room, 12 crystal glasses were arranged on the table, even though Camilla dined alone during her visits. In the study, piles of neatly stacked letters sat untouched beside a feather pen. A fresh bouquet of white roses stood in the same vase that had been recorded in palace archives 5 years earlier. It was as if time had stood still within those walls, every detail carefully preserved. But there's something most people don't know about this. Behind the scenes, Charles's security team had once raised quiet concerns about the villa's strange upkeep. According to palace sources, the utility records showed fluctuating energy consumption even when the estate was supposed to be empty. Once, a maintenance contractor had reported hearing faint music playing inside during the off-season, long after everyone had left. These details were brushed aside as system errors or misunderstandings. But now, standing there, both Charles and William could sense something beneath the surface that didn't belong. They entered the library next, a long, narrow room lined with oak shelves and heavy red drapes. It should have been a comforting space, but it wasn't. William noticed several books pulled slightly out of place and a few papers scattered across the writing desk. Every one of them turned face down. The ink had faded on some pages, suggesting they'd been there for months, maybe longer. On one corner of the desk lay a stack of photographs turned upside down, their edges curled and yellowed with age. Charles hesitated before touching them. Something about the room felt private, almost sacred, as though it held memories no one was meant to disturb. The silence grew heavy, filled only by the soft ticking of a distant clock. It didn't make sense. None of it did, until they looked closer. As they examined the shelves, William noticed faint markings on the wall behind one of the portraits, small, almost invisible scratches, forming what looked like letters or initials. He leaned closer and realized they spelled out something incomplete, as if someone had started writing and stopped midway. The air in the room grew colder. Charles turned one of the papers over and found what appeared to be a half-written note. The handwriting was Camilla's, unmistakable, but the words were cryptic and harsh. It mentioned something being kept hidden until the right time, followed by a name that had been scratched out so violently the paper tore. William set the photos upright and froze. They were all of Princess Diana, some from public appearances, others clearly private, perhaps taken by photographers who had never released them. Each had markings or notes written in the margins, circled faces and highlighted details. It wasn't an ordinary collection. It looked like a study, maybe even surveillance. The realization shocked him. Charles said nothing, but the tension between father and son was unmistakable. The air felt too heavy to breathe. They left the library in silence and walked toward the master bedroom. The corridor leading there was lined with framed artwork and scented candles. Though none had been lit, their footsteps echoed softly, the only sound in the vast house. The further they went, the colder the air became, as though the walls themselves were warning them to stop. Charles hesitated at the bedroom door. The handle was shiny, and a faint smell of perfume clung to it. He turned it slowly, his hand trembling slightly. What they discovered would leave anyone speechless. The room inside was perfect at first glance, an immaculate bedspread, sunlight filtering softly through white curtains, and a dressing table arranged with brushes, jewelry boxes, and perfume bottles. But beneath the surface, perfection lay something deeply unsettling. A drawer left slightly open revealed envelopes marked with dates that coincided with Diana's major public appearances years earlier. On the dresser was a small box filled with press clippings, all focused on the late princess. Some had headlines crossed out with ink, others had comments scribbled in the margins, angry, emotional, and personal. There was even a folded napkin from a charity event where Diana had once appeared, pressed flat like an artifact preserved in time. Charles stepped back, visibly shaken. He had expected a simple inspection, but found instead a shrine that felt both intimate and obsessive. William's eyes moved across the room, taking in every object, every trace of fixation. The silence between them said more than words ever could. They both knew this was no ordinary retreat space. It was something else entirely. Something darker, more deliberate. They stood there for a long time, neither moving nor speaking. The house that had always been described as her sanctuary now felt like a chamber of secrets, a mirror of hidden guilt and memory, one that had been waiting for them to uncover it, and that's when everything changed. The rest of the inspection was brief. They left the bedroom quietly and made their way out, each lost in thought. The silence that followed them back down the hallway was heavier than when they arrived. Outside, the air seemed colder, sharper, as if the world itself had shifted. The villa no longer looked peaceful, it looked haunted by purpose. Neither of them mentioned what they had found, not yet, but deep down, they both understood that this discovery was only the beginning, and whatever truth waited ahead would shake the foundations of the monarchy itself. Queen Camilla's obsession had taken a form that neither of them could have imagined. The master bedroom felt more suspicious than the rest of the villa. It wasn't the kind of feeling caused by silence, but something colder, something that made both Charles and William stop at the door without saying a word. As they stepped further in, William's eyes caught the first photograph on the far wall, and his breath froze. There was Princess Diana, smiling in one of her most iconic photos, but the image had been defaced. Thick red markings slashed across her eyes, and beneath it were words scrawled in Camilla's unmistakable handwriting. The wall wasn't adorned with family portraits or royal memories. It was covered almost from floor to ceiling with images of Diana, each one altered, crossed out, or written over with unsettling messages. What had once been a private retreat now felt like the inside of someone's disturbed mind. The deeper they looked, the worse it became. Every inch of the room told a story of bitterness that had clearly built up for years. Some photographs were torn into halves. Others had words like fraud or enemy scribbled across them. On the writing desk sat a small stack of newspaper clippings from the 90s, all about Diana's public appearances and her growing popularity. The margins were filled with notes, small, angry lines written in Camilla's neat but sharp handwriting. It wasn't rivalry anymore. It was obsession, the kind that consumes and distorts everything it touches. Then came the moment that shattered them both. Under a framed photo of the Paris crash lay a piece of paper with the words, "Finally, she is out of the way." It was written in the same ink, the same hand, and it turned the room into something unbearable. William's knees went weak as he stared at it for a few seconds. The silence became suffocating. Disbelief gave way to nausea, grief, and then a wave of anger that had no outlet. Charles stood frozen, his face pale, his fingers trembling as he reached for the nearest table to steady himself. But what happened next shocked everyone. Behind the wardrobe, half hidden by an ornate curtain, they found a map pinned to the wall, an intricate outline of Diana's past movements. London, Paris, New York, each marked with notes, dates, and chilling precision. It wasn't the sort of thing one stumbled upon by accident. It was deliberate, studied, and methodical. Tiny labels like charity, dinner, hospital visit, and meeting with designer showed a level of tracking far too sophisticated to be a coincidence. It was as though someone had been following Diana's life long after she was gone. Beside the map lay a small chest filled with letters. Most were unsigned, but clearly written by the same hand. They carried venom in every line. Criticisms, jealousy, resentment, all circling back to the same woman. William hesitated before picking one up, but when he did, the sentences read like fragments of someone's unraveling thoughts. None of it felt rational. Every word was coded in hatred, but structured with the precision of someone who had been holding it in for far too long. As they moved closer to the bed, the atmosphere turned even colder. Photographs of Diana in her happiest moments, smiling with her sons, attending charity events, had been pinned on corkboards with scribbles layered over them, as if someone had rewritten history inside their own mind. The obsession wasn't a passing phase. It had roots, deep and entangled. It revealed a bitterness that had outlived its origin, something that had evolved into ritual. Charles realized then that this wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about control, about erasing someone who refused to disappear, even in death. There was a drawer in the bedside table, locked but not fully closed. William forced it open, and inside were more photos, older ones clearly reprinted. Now they understood why Camilla had always kept the villa off limits, why no staff ever stayed longer than a season, why her retreats always followed the same secret pattern. What had looked like solitude was, in truth, ritual, an annual return to a private world built entirely on resentment. They agreed without words that they had to return to the palace immediately. There were too many questions that demanded answers, too many years of silence that suddenly made sense. But as the car drove away from the villa, both men knew that whatever they had uncovered was not the end. It was only the beginning of something darker waiting to unfold. The news of what Charles and William found inside the villa could not stay buried for long. Within hours of returning to the palace, Charles summoned an emergency meeting behind closed doors. Only his most trusted advisors were allowed in, but even they could see the shock written across his face. The discovery wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a threat to the very image of the monarchy itself. Every word spoken in that room carried the weight of centuries of royal reputation. What began as a private discussion quickly turned into chaos, and outside those doors, palace staff whispered in corridors, terrified of what would surface next. Some insisted the truth should never reach the public, warning that the monarchy could not survive another scandal of this scale. Others urged honesty, claiming that secrecy would only make things worse once the media uncovered it. Charles listened quietly, but deep down, he had already made up his mind. He could not pretend that what he saw in that villa didn't exist. As the palace scrambled to manage the situation, Camilla was already on her way back from her retreat, unaware that her hidden world had been exposed. She expected the usual silence to greet her return. Instead, she walked into a storm. Charles and William were waiting, the evidence laid out before them. Photographs, letters, maps, everything they had found. The confrontation began in heavy silence. When Charles finally spoke, the tremor in his voice carried more disappointment than anger. Camilla tried to dismiss it at first, insisting it was all misunderstood. She described it as research, claiming she had been studying the public's obsession with Diana for historical reasons. But when William demanded answers about the hateful messages and obsessive notes, her composure cracked. Her tone turned defensive, almost cold, as if the shrine had been nothing more than a private coping mechanism. Her explanation didn't convince either of them. What hurt Charles most wasn't the existence of the shrine, but her lack of remorse. He saw no guilt in her eyes, only irritation that her secret had been found. William's fury filled the room. The image of his mother's defaced photographs refused to leave his mind. The confrontation ended with a silence so heavy, it felt final. Within days, a leak reached the press. No one knew from where, but once it surfaced, it spread globally. Major tabloids from London to New York ran headlines that shook the royal household. Images of Diana's defaced portraits and the map of her movements began circulating online. The palace immediately denied the reports, calling them distorted fabrications, but public trust was already slipping. Social media exploded with outrage, and old wounds reopened across the world. Thank you for staying with us. What do you think about Camilla's actions? Share your opinions in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel, and click the next video on your screen. You'll enjoy it.